Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Federation Hall. If you haven't met me before, my name is David Sequeira. I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery, and I'm also the person that organises Art Forum. And before I introduce our guest speaker, I do want to take a moment and invite you all to ground yourself in the deep knowledge that long before the VCA was thought of, long before the University of Melbourne was thought of, multiple generations of Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation practiced song and dance on this site. They made sculptures, they made paintings, they practiced healing, they shared stories. And it's really with great honour and joy that I acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Our guest speaker, Masato Takasaka. Previously, having performed as a lead guitarist in über-hip rock bands, as well as practicing as a visual artist, Masato Takasaka thinks about his studio practice in musical terms, describing his aesthetic as an iPod shuffle, playing the greatest hits of 20th century avant-garde art with references to constructivism, dada, pop, and minimalism, alongside the back catalogue of his own greatest hits. Primarily working with found objects and materials to construct his gallery-based installations, art and design history collide in Takasaka's mini cities. Described as techno-contemporary, the exuberant chaos of his sculptural practice involves a process of working and reworking everyday materials in inventive ways to make something new. Bent, crumpled, and endlessly interacting surfaces of Takasaka's work explore limitless formal possibilities and combinations. Masato continues to explore his own interest in the reframing of existing images to investigate notions of pop cultural ownership and rock history through the medium of the ready-made and his trademark, already-made. Wherever you are, in Zoom land or in Federation Hall, please make Masato very, very welcome.
Thank you, David. Dr. Sequeira, I'm very humbled and to give the first lunchtime art forum for this semester. Before I begin, I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of this land from where I'm giving this art forum lecture today. I wish to acknowledge the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the East Kulin Nation, and also pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge that this land has never been ceded, always will be, always was Aboriginal land. I'd also like to extend this acknowledgement to any First Nations people in the audience today. Okay, without further ado, I'll begin my infotainment lecture, artist talk. Let us entertain you. Okay, so my name's Dr. Masato Takasaka. I'm also a sessional lecturer here in the School of Art at the Victorian College of the Arts. I teach mainly in the Master of Contemporary Art program in both the studio and theory programs, and also in CAT's critical and theoretical studies. And my research focus is predominantly on postmodernism and appropriation. But let's get started with the cover page or the title page for my artist talk today. I was kind of in 2 minds or 3 minds or 4 minds about the artist talk title today. So I've gone with 5 subtitles for this artist talk. So here we go. Masato Takasaka, Arrested Development. That's a shout out to Christopher L.G. Hill. There, pre-mix the ready-made again. Question, why not white cube your enthusiasm or remix the ready-made? Answer, appropriating appropriation, the artist practice as always already made, which coincidentally is the title of my notorious PhD, which I completed and conferred some time ago back in the day in 2015. But more about that later, or maybe not. Okay. Asterisk, or some answers in advance of some questions regarding the everything always already made wannabe studio Masado Textures Museum of Found Refractions from 1979 to 2022. Double asterisks. Double asterisks again, AKA, I've always wanted to know what my work was about, but was too afraid to ask myself or my former supervisor. We'll have to kind of get the track changes on the ask there because I'll put that back to front. So note to self for my future artist talk. Okay, I'm not sure if that is this cursor working? It doesn't seem to be working. Sorry, can you get? Oh, thank you. Oh, great, thank you. Thanks, June. Okay, as I said, I'd also like to thank David, Dr. Square for inviting me back again here at the VCA. I was also an undergraduate here in the late 90s in the drawing department. And you'll see some of the infamous work that has come out of that program. So I am a product of this literal environment. Okay, so this is kind of a Masado mobile studio visit. As you can see from my, I guess, persona there, that was shot some time ago. That's when I had a studio. I was living the dream, living and working in the city, and I had a studio in the city at TCB when it was in Waratah Place upstairs with some fellow friends and co-workers there, including Ry Haskins, Anna Higgins, and Lane Cormick, who some of you may know. Okay, let's start this mobile studio visit. Okay, so I guess I was going to cover a lot of ground today, but let's see how we go, because this is like slide 4 of 250 something. But again, let's see how we go. Just to kind of preface this artist talk also with I'd like to, I guess I kind of tend to repeat myself a lot, as some of you may know, the students and colleagues that I work with here at the VCA. So kind of, as my former supervisor said to me when I was studying my doctorate, they said, Masado, you'd make a really great politician because you're really good at repeating yourself and you don't really know what you're talking about. So that was a kind of a strategic pause there to kind of fill in the blanks. So it probably worked better when Tony Abbott was in power at the time. So, but you can also fill in the blanks there yourselves. Okay, so I was also I guess I've kind of wanted to talk through, in a way, my latest solo exhibition, which has just unfortunately finished last Saturday at a venue called Connors, which some of you may know, which is located in the Fitzroy Town Hall in Napier Street, Fitzroy. The title of this solo exhibition was titled Almost Everything All at Once, Twice, 3 Times in 4 Parts, Returnal Return Redux, works from the permanent collection and selected loans from the Everything Always Already Made Studio Masato Textures Museum of Found Refractions from 1979 to 2022. I'll just pause for a bit of breath there. I guess this is kind of something that I've been working with for probably this way of working for the last maybe 15 years or so, predominantly coming out of the research that was undertaken in my notorious PhD at Monash University back in the day, which I mentioned before. But more about that later, or maybe not. So you can kind of see a glimpse of my studio practice there at the moment. That's I've got a studio at Hayden's Gallery and Studios, which some of you may know. And that was, I guess, a bit of a teaser in terms of what to expect from the show. But more about that later. I'll probably conclude with a reading of Lisa Radford's text that she wrote for me at the end of this lecture. But for now, I just thought I'd start with this image. Okay, This format of this artist talk / lecture will kind of be going in and out of chronological order. So I guess it's a bit like the kind of archive that I draw on, using my own kind of studio materials, but also archive of past materials, more often than not predominantly relating to my own subjectivity and my own kind of personal autobiography. So I'm going to just start here, also being quite cognizant of the fact that I'm in an art school context, speaking at this art forum talk, and also teaching here, and also I thought it would be a good way to start this art forum talk, looking back at the work that I made when I was a baby Masado in the latte 90s in the drawing department. So this image is my graduate catalogue image for the 1988 Graduate School of Art show. And I guess back in the day, I mean, I guess they still do it. You know, you kind of set up your work and the photographer kind of shoots your work. I guess around this time, I was also, this was in my third year BFA in drawing, where my former teachers were John Catapan, Bernard Sachs, and Jane Cox and Susan Stamp, amongst others. I was also fortunate enough to, I guess, also build quite significant relationships and friendships with the other artist sessional tutors that were employed at that time, including artists like Julia Gorman, Kate Bainan, to name a couple. Also, I think, you know, these kind of, I guess, formative influences, probably Julia's work in particular, was, you know, maybe some of the catalysts for the work that I've been doing. But also, I wanted to talk today also a bit about the legacy that I guess kind of artists leave, whether they're your kind of teachers, mentors, friends, associates. So I'll be speaking about that today. And that's probably in part some of the terrain that's covered in the latest show at Connors, which I'll conclude with today. But I guess just to kind of give you a context for this work, I guess I think it was the Kennett government was in at the time, and they were slashing budgets here and there for the university, etc. I guess that's kind of the state government, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. But you know, I guess that also at the federal level, you know, kind of John Howard, etc. And I guess this was my kind of subtle dig at the kind of incoming upfront fees that were happening at the time. I guess kind of, you know, there was a lot of kind of student union activism at the time, as I'm sure there is still now. But I guess, you know, I kind of wanted to kind of throw that in there, putting my, I guess, union delegate hat that I wear on occasion, probably just for the look. But I guess it's probably in a similar way, that's what I'm kind of doing with this T-shirt, with it in it for the money. I guess I was kind of maybe also making an ironic dig at probably at the art world at large, but also at myself. Being a kind of a recent graduate, you're certainly not in it for the money when you're kind of studying a fine art degree. But much to my parents' chagrin, where I kind of told them that I was studying illustration when I got into drawing, so that was kind of probably some more lucrative aspect there. But sorry, this is kind of probably turning into a self-psychoanalysis analysis session, so I'm going to stop there, but maybe not. Okay. As you can see from the title, it's the title's a self-portrait, non-objective composition. That's a kind of a direct riff off the late artist John Nixon, who eventually became a close friend and a mentor. But we'll talk more about that later, because some of his work is highlighted in the Connors show that has just concluded. Okay, I guess thinking through John's work, this was, I think, oh, it's handy, it's got the date there for you. So this was in 1999 when I started my honours year. So I was under the supervision of the late great Bernard Sachs, who's some of you may know, passed away recently. But I guess this was a really kind of pivotal year for me because it consolidated a lot of the research that I didn't know what I didn't know already what I was doing. But I think it's really laid a foundation for looking back at this work. It's laid a strong foundation for the work that I've continued to do for the past 25 odd years or so. So I'm kind of giving my age away now, but also you'll find that in the musical taste shortly, which is related to the other works which we'll eventually encounter. Okay, so this was also a riff on Nixon's work. I was kind of really obsessed with this idea of, I guess, appropriation, but also, I guess, this idea of cultural appropriation, where I was kind of interested, not specifically in my own culture, although I guess coming from a Japanese Australian background, that was certainly the case where I started doing, I guess, facsimiles of woodblock prints by artists like Hokusai and Hiroshige. But I was kind of making them in these kind of plastic versions with vinyl, as you can kind of see there, and details of the kind of prints, but you only ever get kind of, I guess, a detail of it, so you don't actually really know what the whole kind of image is. And so it's kind of like a fragment of an appropriation, or I guess a kind of a sample or a sample of, you know, kind of a riffing off art history. And I guess that's probably been the mainstay of my work for the past 25 odd years or so, but more about that later. So I guess it's kind of like a remix or a premix of non-objective abstraction, I guess, you know, kind of painting from, I guess, Japanese postcards, etc. You can kind of see in the black and white image there, there's like an image of a Japanese kind of temple architecture, which I guess it's kind of a hybrid of a kind of modernism, or a kind of a, you know, kind of a precursor to a lot of influence in kind of post-war modernist European architecture, etc. But that's a kind of a subject topic for another lecture. So I'll leave that there. But you can also see kind of influences to John Nixon's Cross series, but also to artists like Daniel Buren, etc. So I was interested in this idea of inhabiting, or maybe this is a better analogy, doing a cover version, like the kind of session musician that plays the music of others with their own signature inserted. But more about that later. See how I'm kind of endlessly deferring to something else. Okay, so this is the first ever solo exhibition that I had at TCB Art Inc., which was formerly in the, before I moved to Brunswick, where it is now. I think it was in the city in Waratah Place for a long time, but before that, it was in the Port Phillip Arcade, just off Flinders Street. And you can go there now, and it's turned into a sushi restaurant. I think it's still there, pre-pandemic, but or post-pandemic, but who knows. But I guess I was kind of interested in this kind of shop aesthetic, and you'll see more kind of images here, where I kind of reconstituted the kind of metal shelving from my parents' Japanese grocery store. And I guess that's where the kind of 1979 aspect of the backdating goes from my all-encompassing project, which is the almost always already made studio Masado Textures Museum of Found Refractions. So I'm kind of interested in this idea of the intersection between personal autobiography, but also riffing off and inserting myself into or referring to or having a conversation with art history simultaneously. Oh, there's questions already, or questions. I'll take that as a comment. So I'm very familiar with that model as I have a 1-year-old and a 6-year-old but more about that later. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so as you can see, I guess the display shelf it's been kind of reconstituted, painted with I guess kind of a household enamel. Again, I was kind of probably riffing off John's tools of the trade there, where his preference of utilitarian, I guess kind of not art store paint, but the the kind of utilitarian model of going to the hardware store and buying the paint from there. And so I was kind of interested in replicating that method, but also with kind of reference to my own kind of cultural background via my parents' Japanese grocery store, where the main business is kind of importing Japanese foods. But I guess here it's, I was kind of interested here in the intersection between, I guess, or a mashup between, I guess, a hybrid of pop art inflection and I guess non-objective abstraction, or to kind of paraphrase one of Dr. Sean Lowry's lectures on Neo Geo, this kind of framing of Neo Geo that came out into the late 80s to the early 90s. So if you think of artists like Sherry Levine or Sherry Levine, for example. So see what I did there? So I guess, I was kind of interested in this kind of dual, I guess, I was going to not mention the B word, but binaries between, kind of abstraction or non-objective abstract art and I guess relation to representation or figuration. And in this case, a kind of a cutesy or kawaii kind of pop inflection here for these kind of cartoon-like animals. Okay, maybe I'm kind of talking too much because by this rate we're not going to get very far. So I'll kind of speed things up a bit. Okay, so you can kind of see there, I also included a kind of a replica of a Japanese woodblock print that's done with self-adhesive vinyl. So I was interested in kind of creating a double or a original copy of, kind of a Japanese woodblock print, but it becomes like a facsimile, but also dealing with, I guess, this idea that it's all being kind of made by hand. So I guess it's a kind of a riff on the kind of author, kind of the signature of the author, etc., or maybe it's kind of something about death of the author, etc., something that Roland Barthes said. But in the middle there's a cameo appearance by Lisa Radford there, who was also went through at art school at the time. I guess kind of thinking through that, kind of at art school, I was very fortunate to make kind of lifelong friendships, and also kind of influencing the way we work through conversation. And I think that's the model that's stayed with me throughout the practice, working with others, but maybe not even in the context of working with others, but always already, I guess, having that conversation with the work of other artists through my own kind of, whether it's the appropriation of the artists that I kind of sample or riff off, or invite to collaborate with. So I guess kind of a conversation with art history as well as my own personal autobiography. I guess the what you see on my right there is a kind of a riff or I guess a nod to Eve's line with the kind of blue monochrome, but also I managed to pilfer a kind of a Zen garden fragment model from my father's very particular Zen garden, which he found missing when I kind of exhibited as part of this exhibition. Okay, so this is, I'll just talk very briefly about this. This is another project that I was invited to curate called Who's Afraid of the Avant-Garde, Who Cares? And it was kind of, I invited about 33 artists to, I guess, contribute to this idea of, what is a kind of a monochrome. And that was kind of based on, I guess, my obsession with John's work in relation to kind of the monochrome or the EPW experimental painting workshop. And you can kind of see my work kind of obscured there, but it's a kind of a small orange monochrome, which I replicated. And I asked John to kind of sign it, but he said, I can't sign it because it's not my work. But more on that later. Okay, so I guess I'm kind of riffing off different aspects of my work. This is a much later work now, kind of moving to fast forward to kind of 2009, 2010. This is a series called Post-Structural Jam. Shut Up, You Know You Can Play. We Know You Can Play, which I exhibited at various venues, including Y3K, which was a artist run kind of project space run by artist Christopher L.G. Hill, who some of you may know, and James Deutscher. Also, I exhibited this project in Metro Arts in Brisbane, and eventually it travelled to other venues, including the Tarawara Museum of Art in Healesville, as part of the 2016 Endless Circulation Tarawara Biennial of Art, Biennale of Art, curated by Helen Hughes and Victoria Lidd. But more about that later, or maybe not. But it also kind of travelled to the Mori Art Museum in Tokyo, Japan in 2013, which I was fortunate enough to be a part of a triennial of Japanese contemporary art called Roppongi Crossing. And I guess this was one of the venues for this poster. And I'll just kind of maybe read an excerpt out of that later if we have time. So, but moving on. Okay, blank space for pause. And this is, I guess, another iteration of this post-structural jam work, pre-pandemic, shown at a Brunswick warehouse space facilitated by Neon Park and Nick Leindienst. You can also, my work's on the left there with these kind of expanded, blown up guitar magazine pages from my adolescent years when I was in high school, desperately wanting to be having a career as a bedroom guitarist. Then eventually I was able to live the dream and play in pubs and clubs and also stadiums inside my own head. But more about that later. You can see in this image here, it was a group show also with Lou Hubbard's work there in the background, and also on the right, sculptures by Rob McLeish. Okay, so I guess I was interested in this idea of the guitar magazine collection as a kind of a archive which housed my own kind of, which referred to my own kind of autobiography, but I was also interested in this idea of the session musician that plays the songs of others with signature inserted. And I was interested in returning to that time, I guess, prior to art school, that I was kind of maybe perhaps always already interested in this idea of, maybe kind of mimicking or copying the signature style of others with my own signature inserted. And I guess certainly with the, I guess, genre of guitar playing, I guess that's kind of what you start out doing, kind of learn to sound like your heroes, etc. And I guess I was kind of following that similar pathway through my undergraduate studies at art school, but it's probably never left. Okay, so I guess I was kind of interested in, the relationship between text and image here, but also, this idea of, perhaps in some ways, the guitarist there, the late Eddie Van Halen, who some of you may have heard of. I guess he's kind of riffing off, this idea of kind of modernist, kind of author you know, with the kind of, or this kind of question of audience here. So anyone who says they're not making music for other people can kiss my ass or us. So I guess for him there, he's kind of referring to, I guess, perhaps bands like, you know, kind of from the grunge phenomenon, like Nirvana, for example, who, you know, perhaps, you know, are the kind of, which were kind of, you know, the kind of, I guess, the anathema to kind of the stadium rock band kind of guitar histrionics, which were favored by bands like Van Halen and Bon Jovi at the time, but more about that later. Okay, I guess this is kind of like a, this is a good, probably an example of what I was thinking through, this idea of, you know, maybe kind of revisiting my kind of high school guitar magazine collection, but also kind of rethinking, or how it made me kind of rethink, you know, kind of riffing off modernist or kind of postmodernist art history. So, you know, if you consider this caption here or quote here from Eddie Van Halen, he says, "I really don't think that anyone's done much different on the guitar since me." So I think, you know, for me, that's like a real kind of a modernist, you know, abstract expressionist kind of gesture there, or, you know, kind of proclamation there, which I was kind of interested in, I don't know, kind of sampling or kind of deconstructing there. This is kind of my interest in relation to kind of reconstituting ready-made images. So I also followed up, I guess, in consultation with designer Warren Taylor, who used to run a space called The Narrows back in the day in the city. He's also an academic that teaches at Monash University in visual communication. But this collaborated with him along with the late Damiano Bertoli, who wrote the text for this exhibition. I'm just going to read out an excerpt and see how we go for time. But here we go. Masato Takasaka, like a few artists I know, had a parallel practice as a teenage guitar hero. An adolescent immersion in this world can seem a way of rebelling and saying yes to poetry, while still finding acceptance and praise at an age where we realize it is more important to impress other teenagers than our parents. But these early interests have a way of manifesting themselves later in an artist's practice. Through the already made quality in Takasaka's work, the found objects, the mechanics of constructivism, and geometric abstraction may seem at odds with the sensibility of rock guitar wizardry. This difference is evident in the attitude Takasaka brings to his material and the way he restructures its forms, but mainly in the way it negotiates the idea of technique. The musicians featured in these works are rock guitar heroes or established session musos. Session guys are shapeshifters. As is required, they excel in all genres. And when they release solo albums, much like a resume, they cover it all. Typically, they will feature a blues number, progressive, an extended jazz funk workout, an obligatory Bach prelude. It's a shop's showcase, a folio. They're always playing other people's tunes with signature inserted. Every night laying down the same notes perfectly over someone else's art. It's a scene full of contradictions, improvising, but perfectly creative, but repetitive. Incredible talent, but little or no criticality. They are admired for their skill and virtuosity, but hired for their dependability, which ironically is a product of their teenage incarceration via relentless bedroom practice. They are repressed in puberty and again professionally. Do some folks hate this kind of virtuosity and its display because it doesn't contextualize? It's just about the music. It's the essentialism, the pure meanness of the improvised solo. Apparently, it's a wank. There's a long and well-documented association of rock music with sexuality, but the connection to onanism is more recent and related to the rock guitar solo. Who would say such a thing about a Keith Jarrett piano performance, or heaven forbid, a cellist? Elvis introduced the pelvis to the visualization of the rock vocabulary, and Hendrix wrote the Guitarma Sutra, thrusting, playing with his mouth, and squirting lighter fluid onto his squealing axe. But it's the gratuitous extended soloing of second-generation heavy metal guys and prog rockers which we associate with self-love. Is it the pretension and self-glory, or the visual resemblance to the act, courtesy of the facial expressions and proximity of these frenzied hand movements to the usually male pubis? Structurally, the relationship of rhythm and cadence to these acts and the improvisational element they employ is very different. The solo form is more akin to oratory, a kind of speech or lyricism. Perhaps punk, with its velocity, repetition, resemblance to rant, and the over in 3.5 minutes format is more appropriate. Takasaka's recent work negotiates the repeated act. Previous sculptures and drawings have been reconstituted in recent shows, but rather than recycle past works, these images revisit the magazines which fascinated him during his youth in an attempt to connect with a time when his methodology was formed. The twin thrust of Abstraction and Guitar Player magazine produced a child, and growing up in the 80s, the cock rock decade, he learned to make the work of art in the age of musical masturbation. Eddie Van Halen's constructivist-inspired guitar paint job could be the pivot where Takasaka's visual practice converges with his guitar practice. His drawings and reassembled installations are the result of an improvised riffing process, an elaborate call and response system, enacted with the self. Like the high velocity rock solo, these automatic structures seem to make themselves. Accident and intention seem interchangeable. There is little space between the idea and its form. This idea of direct and intuitive correspondence is challenged by Takasaka's new work. These images are about technique, but don't display any, and the format they reproduce contains various levels of authorship. The magazine pages features text, a photograph, subject, an advertisement, a collaboration where the singular voice is muted, much like the catalogue PDF that I'm reading out to you now, holding, designed, written, and illustrated by others. Somewhere between a fictional restaging of Vito Acconci's Seabed, performed with a guitar pick, and the story of Fragonard performing a 20-minute painting in his parlor before an applauding audience, Takasaka questions his relationship to the idea of studio and presents us with a possible version of what he would rather be doing. Damiano Bertoli, 2009. Okay, I'm just going to kind of maybe skip through a couple of projects here because I'm running out of time, but this is a body of work called Garage Days Revisited, which focused on a series of repainting my kind of high school work, or seminal high school painting work, which referenced Robert Jack's, on the one hand, Robert Jack's series of paintings circa in the mid to late 80s, and on the other, influenced by listening to Metallica back in the day, as one does, making these paintings. And I called this show Garage Days Revisited after the Metallica album, which also before becoming the Uber Stadium heavy metal rockers touring around the world, they were also, kind of a garage band, just, kind of listening and playing songs that also, that they wanted to sound like. And I kind of was riffing off this idea of, I guess, the work that I was making at that time in high school that were, perhaps formative influences, but you don't know what you like, but you kind of, kind of do this idea of kind of method acting, or again, this idea of the session musician that plays songs of others with signature inserted, with, I guess, this idea of Metallica doing cover versions of seminal tunes that they started playing in the garage. So I was kind of interested in this idea of, this, on the one hand, again, something that maybe continues with my practice and the practice of many other artists that I'm influenced by, that, refer to one's own kind of autobiography, and also referring to conversation and inserting yourself within a kind of a discourse with kind of modernist and postmodernist art history. So this was a the body of work that came out of that called Garage Days Revisited, which I was fortunate enough to exhibit at Sutton Gallery in 2016. So there you're kind of confronted with various different cover versions of the original work. And there's one now. And you can also purchase this work at a very reasonable price at the Connors fundraiser, which opens tonight between 6 and 8 p.m. See what I did there? Okay. So I'm going to maybe conclude with perhaps a pivotal work here, which maybe started my return to kind of reusing the kind of work that I've previously already made, and which spurred me on to my kind of MFA research and also my doctoral thesis exegesis in fine art at Monash University, called which was titled "Appropriating Appropriation: The Artist's Practices Always Already Made." I guess for those in the know, that's a kind of a reference to Douglas Primp's essay, seminal essay, "Appropriating Appropriation," which was published in October. I guess you know, kind of in that essay, he talks about this idea of appropriation as material versus appropriation as style. I guess that's kind of also stayed with me with the kind of work to date that I've kind of riffed off in relation to I guess an appropriation of artists that I admire and you know, kind of, I guess, kind of want to be like, but also and B, I guess, reconstituting and remixing you know, kind of the kind of genres of kind of art history akin to the kind of iPod shuffle, as was mentioned before. I guess that analogy is getting quite dated now. So I guess if I was to reframe that for today, it would be more like the kind of Spotify playlist algorithm. But this exhibition was called "I Like My Old Stuff Better Than My New Stuff," which was riffing off the kind of Regurgitator album that came out at the time. But this was, I guess, kind of my kind of coming out of dropping out of architecture school to kind of recommence my art practice, and I kind of wanted to kind of consolidate maybe the things that I was doing from art school and beyond, and making kind of a mashup, bricolage or assemblage of all the work that I had made previously. And I guess this was around 2007, so it was I guess maybe kind of very prescient in relation to what was happening at the time. So you can kind of think of you know, kind of the big blockbuster exhibitions like Monumental, the Object in the 21st Century, which was held at the New Museum at the time. And I guess, you know, I was kind of, I didn't know what that was at the time, but I was kind of tapping into that kind of aesthetic, perhaps, which is kind of making a comeback recently. But I guess, following enough, I guess a conversation that I had at the time in the studio, Alex Baker, who was an American curator that was kind of here for a time at the NGV, he visited my studio and he said, "Masado, this is awesome. This is kind of like unmonumental. You know, you could have been in that show." And then he mentioned his friends curated it, and I was like, "Great, when can I be in the next one?" But then I never heard back. But more about that later. So that's you know, kind of professional practice, or you know, unprofessional practice, or at least you know what not to do. Okay, I am going to. Oh, I guess for some reason the slides that I show now they're different to what I was hoping for. So I'm going to rip off the school of Ted Colles. Hello, Ted, if you're kind of watching through Zoom today. Okay, so improvising, that's kind of my forte. So this is the work that I was invited to show at the Tarawara Museum of Art as part of a group biennial exhibition, which is the Tarawara Biennale. This was in 2016, called Endless Circulation, curated by Helen Hughes and Victoria Lynn. I guess the theme of this biennial exhibition was this idea of kind of reconstitution and circulation within, I guess, contemporary art, and how contemporary artists, I guess, riff off that as well. So I guess this was an opportunity for my work to be showcased here. I guess, you know, maybe some of these elements that are in the show here have also made it into the exhibition at Connors. So maybe I'm just going to jump out of this, and I'll just maybe show you some images of the Connors show. I'll just maybe briefly talking about that. This was a show which, another shout out to Christopher L.G. Hill and Jan Manik. If you're listening out there through Zoom, Jan, this was their basement gallery called, I'm not sure what it's called now. It's, I think it started off being called Chris and Jan's basement gallery. So this was like, I think it's the kind of basement in Jan's kind of yes. So I guess it's his the kind of share house. It's like his house. And it's like you've both kind of commandeered the kind of basement garage. So I guess it's kind of, you know, the kind of antithesis or antithesis of the white cube here. But this kind of features works which were also shown in the Connors show, which was you know, kind of perhaps riffing off I guess a tribute now to the my dear friend and teacher and mentor Bernard Sachs, who also recently passed away, as some of you may know. I guess looking back at this work now, I guess it's kind of thinking through, you know, this idea of erasure, but also montage. So it's kind of a, the process of these works is they're kind of fed through the printer, and they're a kind of a montage or a Google search of the works that kind of come up when I kind of Google myself. At you know, when I'm kind of feeling a bit sorry for myself, I kind of tend to kind of you know, kind of Google image myself and go, oh, you know, I've actually done something, and so you know, I can refer to that and I can make some work out of it. But I've probably told people too much already. But this is probably I'll probably try and get some images from the Connors show, because this is the only way it's going to work. Okay, June, does this have access to the internet? Thank you. I'll just try if this works. Okay, what?
Can I share the screen? So
Oh, yes.
people on Zoom can also see it?
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, good.
Let's do this. Okay, is it
I'll just share the screen.
okay, great. Is it sharing now?
Not yet.
Oh, okay, you can share from now if you like. Or
Oh, I just need to go into.
oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so just before we start this segment of this concluding segment to my artist talk, which some of you may be breathing a sigh of relief. I know I am. So I'll be doing that while I'm kind of concluding with this last reading of Lisa Radford's text for my exhibition. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just conclude with the catalogue text which accompanies my exhibition that's just concluded at Connors with text by Lisa Radford. VFX MMS for MT by LR via or via KD, JN, DB, and BS. Dear Masato, I just sent you an SMS with the link to the book what will be already exists. Published late last year, the book, which I haven't always already read, speaks to artists' archives and self-historicization. Last night, I saw Everyone, Everywhere, All at Once. Released this year, the film is a K-pop manga meets magical realism and the multiverse. That's better. My SMS to you the other night read, it's about the emotiverse. These two divergent examples, parallels in pop and populace, swirl around my head while I'm in your room at Connor's Corners. One arrives in consciousness via Katarina Paseta. She is researching artists and collectives that worked in the former Yugoslavia, which I share an interest in. It is Zdenka Badovina who has come to write about artists and self-historicization. The film Everywhere, Everyone, Everywhere, All at Once was seen because it already exists. Arriving at the same point for a moment, adjacent points and parallel, be it Katerina and I, or you and Mutlu Serkes. Dating and dates, places and people, portraits and paraphernalia, time and timelines, communities whose vectors traverse pasts, presents, and futures, in specific reference to histories we don't want lost to a cultural economy whose free market is uninterested in our freedom. What did Nikos Papastagiadis write on Art and Friendship on the page the book fell open to? Quote, the limitations of the nationalist paradigm have become increasingly self-evident in contemporary visual studies and art history, unquote. Masking tape makes vectors beneath our feet, lines marking the corners of this once council chambers, now almost white cubed room, speaking to Marcel Duchamp's string or Kerry Polonaise's ruler-based drawings. Overlapped by pegboard, the same pegboard from 1999 or 1979. The tape and its spotted blue shop fitters cladding is neither a line nor parallel. Upon it rests seemingly everyone from everywhere across time as delineated by you, all at once. An archive able to respond to architecture and time or timing. Catalogues, posters, invitations, guitars, exhibitions, sculptures, paintings, other people's paintings, John Nixon's painting, as you can see here, featured from my collection, an L for Lorelei, your daughter, or rather my daughter's collection, a tape from Matthew Griffin, your friend, an essay by Damiano Bertoli that I've just read out to you in the course of this artist talk, another friend, all artists, a room sheet from DB show at Gertrude Street circa 2003, a collage he made for Save 10 Murray Street, the brutalist building designed by your partner, Madeline Kidd's grandfather, David Hartley Wilson, co-designed with Dirk Bolt in Hobart, which no longer exists. Oh, so that's the bit that I was speaking to there. So this brutalist building designed by my partner's grandfather, David Hartley Wilson in Hobart, which no longer exists. I guess the poetic resonance of this work is the artist that made it, my friend Damiano Bertoli. He also sadly passed away recently, and I guess I was kind of interested in showing this work because I guess no longer the building doesn't exist and the maker of the artwork doesn't exist either. Okay, maybe I'm still kind of processing this work, so I'll move on to the next passage of this text. Your archive moves and challenges pending events and contexts, exhibitions and readings, music and life, everyone, everywhere, all at once. What the thinking through this multiverse offers is the possibility to think outside an origin. Your floating architectural world that supports, contains, and holds histories shared and divergent, similarity denying a beginning. Nikos again, between the recognition of the visibility of the other and a redefinition of the status, a redistribution of the historical significance, and a reconfiguration of the terms of negotiation that would otherwise continue to make other cultures invisible. There is, as Mercer also argues, a lot of work to be done. The Roland piano Kiola box printed with Made in Japan is not for reading, it is for being. It houses the mega poster version, remake, enlargement, or is it a detail of the poster essay Damiano wrote for you? In proximity, another poster made by Warren Taylor and written by me. Nearby, another poster for Nixon's potato print show, shown most recently at Guzzler, loved and altered by Lolly, my 6-year-old daughter. Acknowledging Jacqueline Stajanovich's work, Lolly also says, this poster is beautiful, Daddy. Put it in your exhibition. So I did. Black and white domestic printer prints, Google images searches of self, printed one over the other, accumulating and erasing, a nod to the late Bernard Sachs, my friend, teacher, and mentor. The arrangements material, the networks, both visible and not, active forms, contact, dynamic and shifting, expanding in many directions, as opposed to art history that foregrounds the idea that of art as an aesthetic object. Your archives challenge us to redefine art, a process that involves a dissolution of the hierarchies between document, archive, art, and social activity to the point where they become interchangeable. Lisa stole that from Daniel Groom. You know, I write in fragments. It is not unlike how you remake them, layering information, omitting things in order to see what the gaps reveal. The holes in your pegboards are a grid you ignore, the phone call you score and balance to elevate. Documenting the footnotes, a living CV. We both acknowledge this time. This is a kind of memorial, JNDBBS, methods and means for making montage, a mode of political insertion. These are not the grand narratives of history paintings we learnt about at art school, said in a Norbert Loeffler voice. This timeline runs adjacent, perpendicular and other, an alternate memory, resistance to historical time. An island connected to a garage paintings, a tribute to the high school abstraction, which I've spoken about previously in this lecture. Your universe is forever expanding, its architecture undetermined by built space, but responding to it and others. An album cover, books, crits, cats classes, a talk, a message thread, Facebook posts, an Instagram account for Lane Cormich, Masado textures. Christine Stiles' essay begins. Collecting the future entails maintaining a life suspended in time. As the collector imagines the archive, a voracious accrual of the past persistently mandates attention to the present. Your mandate to the present demands an oral narration, your work an intercalator as much as you, bootlegging the self, copying the copy, extrapolating on the extended notion of the rhetoric in order to politically and methodologically demand an unconsciousness of the polis in present as a relation to the past and in connection. To us, your family, art history, generalities, specificities, everything, everywhere, all at once. You call it a museum. We could call it an archive. Regardless, it is whatever form it takes. It is active and future-oriented, employing a dynamic approach to history as an open artwork. As an artist, activist, artistic practice, Lisa stole that from Zdenka Badanovic. After the movie, I get an SMS, I think officially called MMS, from Esmonen that reads, all the VFX for this film was done by 9 people, including the 2 directors, with the majority of the shots being done by a core group of 5 people. None of the VFX team went to school for VFX. They were all friends who taught themselves with tutorials they found online for free. It is the end of the everyday conversation I have with you, masquerading as a letter and existing as an essay. Beside me on the table is the John Nixon catalogue from the Lion House Museum and the UNSW reader for the exhibition Friendship is a Way of Life. There too is the book Lucina Lane has lent me, Haim Steinbach's monograph Every Single Day, all at once. Lisa X. I'd like to conclude with dedicating this lecture to John, Damiano, and Bernard. Thank you. There's copies of this poster. If anyone didn't have them and was unable to visit the exhibition, feel free to take a copy of the catalogue poster, which I've just recited for you here today. And thank you for listening.
Masado, really on behalf of everyone here, thank you for such an incredibly generous talk that took us through all sorts of spaces and times, and you know, it was really beautiful to be with you, and just I haven't got any other word except generous for you to share that so willingly. Please join me in thanking Masado again.